Welcome to the Week 7 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, also known as Betting with Benny. We are available on YouTube, so make sure you guys like and subscribe, and also available on the Game Plus network. So hello to everybody watching us in that way. We're going to go through each game here tonight, take a look at the opening lines from DraftKings and FanDuel, and figure out where the value might be. The first game we're going to start with is the Thursday night football game between the New Orleans Saints and the Arizona Cardinals. The Saints are 2-4, coming off a loss to Cincinnati, 30-26 over the weekend. The Cards are also 2-4, coming off a loss to the Seattle Seahawks, 19-9. Couple interesting things I wanted to talk about before we get started here. The Saints right now currently are without all three of their starting wide receivers, Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas. All three of those guys are out. The Cardinals will be welcoming back DeAndre Hopkins from a 6-game suspension in this game, but Marquise Hollywood Brown got hurt on the last possessions that they had in the game against Seattle that they wound up losing. He went up for a pass. The DB came down on his ankle, and he actually had to leave the field after a timeout. So we're not 100% sure how that's all going to work out, especially on a short week, right? Because this is a Thursday night game. He just got injured at the end of the game on Sunday. So we'll have to see how all of that works out. With Hopkins coming back and Brown potentially out, there really isn't much of an adjustment to make. I'm basically just sliding DeAndre Hopkins in for Marquise Brown. I would have made a little bit of an upgrade to them if both of those guys were available, especially with Rondale Moore as well. This is a team that's got a lot of good wide receiver options right now. But again, if Brown is going to be out and Hopkins is going to play, I think those two guys are basically a wash right there. So we'll have to see how that works out during the week. With all that being said, the way that I broke this game down, I have the Cards are slightly better than the Saints on a neutral field, but it's very close between those two teams there. With the home field advantage, I get Arizona -3. DraftKings has Arizona -2.5. FanDuel also Arizona -2.5. So maybe there's a slight value on Arizona that you can get them at -2.5 in both of those instead of -3, but not really enough that I'd be willing to make a bet on it here. I think it's a little bit below. I would probably expect this to go up to the -3 before it went down to a -2, but really in the overall scheme of things, not anything I'm really looking at here. So let's move on to the 1 o'clock games. The first one we're going to talk about here is the Cleveland Browns taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Cleveland is 2-4, coming off a beatdown at the hands of the New England Patriots, 38-15 over the weekend, with rookie Bailey Zappi and the young Ramondre Stevenson leading the backfield for New England in that game. Baltimore also 3-3, coming off a loss in a close game to the New York Giants, 24-20. When I break this down, I get Baltimore is probably about 2 to 3 points better than Cleveland. Adding in home field advantage, probably get somewhere around -4, -4.5. DraftKings has this game at -6. FanDuel has it at -6.5. For me, that's too many points. Now, does too many points mean I want to bet the Cleveland side of this game? No, probably not. I'm going to be staying away from the Cleveland side of this game. But at that -6, -6.5, I don't think it's really great to tease Baltimore down to even or to -0.5 and needing them to win here. This is more of one of those things where, I think the number's a little bit too high. It's not going to push me over to the Cleveland side, but it very likely keeps me off of betting on the Baltimore Ravens here. I do think the Ravens win this game. I just think -6, -6.5 is too many points. We've seen Cleveland before just be able to get the ball on the ground and just kind of run it and control the game. It did not work against New England last week, who, basically sold out to kind of stop the run and force Cleveland to beat them through the air. And Cleveland wasn't able to do that in that game. And then they fell behind. And then they had to throw the ball. I think Jacoby Brissett threw close to 50 passes in that game. And that is not the game script that's going to ever work out positive for the Cleveland Browns. So I like Baltimore to win the game, but I don't know if I want to lay 6.5 points. Like I said, it's not enough to get me onto the Cleveland side, but it is probably enough to keep me off of the Baltimore side. Next game up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Carolina Panthers. Tampa Bay is 3-3 on the year. They're coming off what I consider to be a bad loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 20-18. Yes, the Steelers did have a new quarterback in there, although Trubisky was the one who wound up ending that game for them as well. Tampa Bay's offense just really did not look good. The defense is fine. I mean, the defense kept another team under 20 points. that's all you could really ask for, defense. So it's definitely not the defense's fault here. But I did not like what I saw out of the offense here. Tampa Bay really needs to get that going. They need to protect Brady better. Mike Evans did not have a big game. Chris Godwin played pretty well. Leonard Fournette was okay. I'm not going to say he was great, but he was okay in that game as well. Luckily for them, though, they take on the Carolina Panthers, who are not a very good team. Carolina is 1-5, coming off a loss to the Los Angeles Rams, 24-10 in that game over the weekend. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. PJ Walker was the quarterback for most of this game. Got a little banged up at the end there, but we'll see what happens. I don't know when Sam Darnold's going to be back here. I don't know if Baker Mayfield's going to be available. But at the end of the day, Carolina is just not a very good football team here. I get Tampa Bay on a neutral field being about 12 points better than Carolina is. When you factor in home field advantage, I get it down to like -10, which is the exact same number that DraftKings has and the exact same number that FanDuel had it at the opening line. So -10 seems to be a consensus number here. Again, my number's -10, their number's -10. I just really don't see any value. We're not getting through the 7 and the 3, so there's really no reason to tease it here. I'm probably just going to be avoiding this game altogether. Next game up, the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Atlanta is 3-3, coming off a win against San Francisco, 28-14. Atlanta is a team that I had to adjust up again this season. Feels like I'm doing that every week here. They are 6-0 against the spread, despite having a 3-3 record. They're basically this year's Detroit Lions. For those of you who remember last year, the Lions didn't win a ton of football games, but man, they covered in all those games. And Atlanta somehow keeps finding a way to stay in games that we keep saying, well, this is the week where regression is going to hit. This is the week where regression is going to hit. Everybody seemed to be on San Francisco -4. And you know what? It wound up not cashing. Atlanta won that game outright. So I think we have to start respecting the Atlanta Falcons a little more. I moved their, adjusted total up a little bit here. I moved up their, power rankings number a little bit here. Did I move it enough? I don't know. I felt like I kept moving it up enough the last couple of weeks too. And they kept going on and, covering the spread by a decent margin. So Atlanta's one of those teams that's really tough for me right now. Kyle Pitts was back. Cordero Patterson's still out for them. But yet they had 3 or 4 guys that ran the ball pretty well, including quarterback Marcus Mariota. Cincinnati, 3-3 on the season. They're coming off a win against a tough New Orleans team. That was 30-26 was the score in that game there. Let's see. Cincinnati is at home here. I get Cincinnati on a neutral field about 5 points better. Factor in home field advantage, you get it up to about a full 7. FanDuel has it at 6.5, so a little bit below there. I guess there's a little bit of value on the Cincy side here. Again, if you can get it below the 7 at 6.5, obviously that's a key number. So, there's a little bit here, but not anything that I'm going to go empty the piggy bank and mortgage the house for and make sure I get some money on here. So a little bit on the Cincinnati side, but it's more of just a slight lean here than it is something I want to bet on. Next game up to talk about, the Detroit Lions taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Detroit is 1-4. They're coming off a bye. So we did give them a little bit of an adjustment upward because they do have that extra rest. Dallas is playing the Sunday Night Football game against Philadelphia. It's about halftime right now. They're down. It's less than 3 touchdowns, but pretty close to it. I think it's 20-0 or something. Last time I looked before I came on the air here. Dallas is 4-1 on the season. Very likely to go to 4-2 unless something changes drastically in the Sunday Night Football game here. Dak Prescott is expected to be back next week, or at least that is the initial word that we're hearing out here. So I'm not 100% positive on what the number is going to be on this game. There may be an adjustment I make after this game, depending on how bad they look against Philly, although Philly's a very good team. So I don't know if there's going to be much of an adjustment that's made there. I did expect Philly to beat Dallas, so that wouldn't be anything of a surprise. If Dak Prescott plays in this game, again, how much do you adjust for Dak? Because to me, Dak was, when he originally went out, I made an adjustment of a little bit less than a touchdown. I think it was maybe 6 points was the adjustment that I made here. But the more I think about this and the more I look about it, I mean, I've actually adjusted Dallas up at least twice since Dak has been out. So really, it's probably more like maybe a 3-point adjustment is what I would make here if Dak Prescott is in, because I don't think it's going to be 100% totally sharp Dak Prescott after he's coming off a couple weeks being out. And Cooper Rush also did a really good job with the exception of tonight so far against the Philadelphia Eagles. Cooper Rush has done a really good job with Dak Prescott out here. So really, I made about a 3-point adjustment. So if Dak is in, the number that I would get for this game would be -10.5. If Dak is not in and it's Cooper Rush at quarterback, you would probably get like a -7.5, maybe even a -7 if you want to make that argument, which is the number that DraftKings and FanDuel have here for this game. So I don't know. I mean, for me, I don't think there's really any value here. If Dak plays, then yeah, I think there is a little bit of value on the Dallas side. I think that number is probably slightly lower than it should be. But also, it depends on how you feel about, will Dak be sharp when he comes back? Will he be the old Dak Prescott? The offense, like I said, they've been a little limited under Cooper Rush, but they performed pretty well. So I don't think we have to make a massive adjustment here. A 100% healthy Dak, I probably would have made this a bigger number and been closer to 10.5. But without him being 100% healthy, I'm not really going to go down that road. Next game up, the New York Giants taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Giants 5-1 on the season, coming off another big win over a team that people didn't think they were going to beating Baltimore 24-20 in that game there. Saquon Barkley did get a little banged up, but he did come back in towards the end. The Giants defense, I think, is what people are really sleeping on here. That defense is a lot better than people are giving them credit for. They're good at stopping the pass. They're good at stopping the run. They have some guys that can rush the passer this year. This Giants defense is legit, and I think that's one of the things that's helping them here. Hopefully they start getting some of these wide receivers back. Wan'Dale Robinson finally came back last week. Had a pretty big game in his first game back for the Giants. Hopefully Kadarius Toney gets back here soon as well. They do have guys like Darius Slayton and Richie James and who's the other guy they had out there today? Marcus Johnson, I think. So, they have some bodies, but not really anybody that's going to move the spread or really scare any opposing defenses or defensive coordinators who really have to kind of, game plan around some of these guys. Let's see. On the Jacksonville side, they are really in a tailspin right now. They are 2-4. They're coming off a loss to the Indianapolis Colts, 34-27. Some interesting things that we saw in that game. Marvin Jones was out in that game. We'll have to see if he's going to be back or not. The other thing that we noticed in that game is Travis Etienne starting to get a little bit of a bigger role, especially at the expense of James Robinson. So, James Robinson truthers are not going to like to hear that. But again, the guy has been basically a plotter. He's had a bunch of touchdowns, but really he's not averaging, a lot of yards per carry. Travis Etienne, definitely the more explosive. And they had a third running back as well who got some carries in that game, ripped off like a 40-yard touchdown run as well. So it does look like James Robinson's days of being a bell cow back in Jacksonville are definitely over. So when I break this game down on a neutral field, I get the Giants are about 3 points better. When you factor in the home field advantage, I get New York Giants -1. The spread on DraftKings and FanDuel is Jacksonville -2, Jacksonville -2.5. So for me, the real value here, I'm not going to take Giants +1 or +2 or +2.5. What I really want to do is just take the Giants straight up on the money line. I mean, listen, this is a 5-1 team. They seem to know how to win games. They seem to always do enough to win some of these games. They've been in some close games against teams that are better than Jacksonville, beating Green Bay and Baltimore in the last 2 weeks here. So I like the New York Giants. I like the New York Giant money line. That would be the way that I decide to play this game here. Speaking of the Green Bay Packers, that's the next game we're going to talk about here. The Green Bay Packers taking on the Washington Commanders. Green Bay 3-3 on the season, coming off a loss to my New York Jets 27-10 in a game where the Jets looked really good and Green Bay looked really, really bad, especially on the offensive side of the football. I don't know what the problem is there. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is one of the GOATs. He's been around for a while. Maybe it's his receivers at this point. They have a good running game. They just keep getting into these game scripts where they have to go away from the running game. And honestly, I don't think that this passing game can beat anybody right now. Robert Tonyan, big game, 90 yards this last weekend. Allen Lazard, another touchdown and 70-something yards as well. But if Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan are your number 1 and number 2 options, I can't really tell you have a lot of talent here or that you're going to scare anybody on the other side. Luckily for them, they do take on a pretty bad team here in the Washington Commanders. On a neutral field, the Commanders did play on Thursday Night Football, so we gave them a little bit of an adjustment for that. On a neutral field here, I would get Green Bay is about 6.5 points better, slightly less than a touchdown. Factor in home field advantage for the Commanders. The number I got comes out to -4.5. FanDuel and DraftKings both opened this up at -5.5 here, so a little bit higher than my number. Again, a lot like what we said with I think it was the Baltimore-Cleveland game was the other one that we said this with. It's not high enough to get me to go onto the Washington Commander side of this, even with them being at home, but it's enough to keep me off the Green Bay side of this, especially after watching the Jets beat up on them and the Giants beat them in the last 2 weeks. Like I said, this Green Bay team Does not look like things are going really well for them right now. So that brings us to the last game in the 1 o'clock window, and that's going to be the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Tennessee Titans. Indianapolis, 3 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie on the season, coming off that win over Jacksonville, 34-27. And you know what? Kudos to them. I thought they played really well. They took a shot at the end of that game there, got Alex Pierce in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. Deion Jackson played really well, had 10 catches in that game, but did wind up getting hurt at the end, leaving Phillip Lindsay to close things out. So we need to see what happens with Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines before we can really say what we want to do on this game here. Currently, I have those guys as out if one of those guys decides to come in. Taylor would be a little bit of a bump to this team, probably about a point, maybe a point and a half. Nyheim Hines, maybe a half a point. I don't really make much of an adjustment there. But again, you're making an adjustment based on who would be getting those carries if those guys don't play. So I have Phillip Lindsay as a below average NFL running back. So Nyheim Hines would be slightly better than him, and Jonathan Taylor would actually be a lot better than him. But again, running backs don't really move the needle all that much. Taylor being one of the best in the league and Lindsay being one of the, lesser backups in the league, this would actually move it. Like I said, about a point and a half would probably be the way I'd go here. So without that point and a half, though, the way I break this game down, I get Tennessee is about 2.5. Not exactly 3. It's probably more like 2.5 points better on a neutral field. Factor in home field advantage. I would get Tennessee minus 4.5. DraftKings has this at -2. FanDuel has it at -2.5. So I have no problem laying the -2 over on DraftKings. I think that's the way to go. Again, remember, if you do get Jonathan Taylor playing in this game, you add about a point and a half to that, so it would be -3.5, or, what would you get there? No, you wouldn't even get -3.5. Oh, my number would drop down to -3, so the -2 and the -2.5 would probably make a little bit more sense there for me if that's the way that it did. But like I said, until we get news on whether or not Jonathan Taylor's going to be playing, until we get that confirmation, even though I think he probably will be back, I'm going to leave it here and say that the value is on Tennessee. I have no problem laying -2 with Tennessee. If Jonathan Taylor is ruled out, I love laying -2 with Tennessee because, like I said, my number would be more like -4.5. So there you go. That's going to wrap it up for all the games in the 1 o'clock window. I did want to mention we do have 4 teams on bye this week. The 4 teams on bye are going to be the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Rams. Who else do we got? The Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're a fantasy player, those are 4 teams that have a lot of very good fantasy players on it. So this is going to be a tough week for all you out there in fantasy world. But we'll talk about that on a different podcast or a different show. This one is all about the betting world right now. And we're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back to talk about the 4 o'clock games, the Sunday night game, and the Monday night game here on Betting with Benny. And welcome back to the Week 7 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, otherwise known as Betting with Benny, available on YouTube and also available on the Game Plus network. We only have, I think, 5 games left to talk about here, and we're going to start it off in the late 4 p.m. window with my New York Jets traveling to Colorado to take on the Denver Broncos. The Jets are 4-2 on the season, coming off a win against the Green Bay Packers, 27-10, and you could hear the pride in my voice about saying that here today. Denver is playing on Monday Night Football against the Los Angeles Chargers, so we're going to have to wait to see how that game works out. Going into that game, they are 2-3 on the year. I took a point away from them because they have one less day of rest to prepare for this game because they're playing on Monday Night Football. When I do that, what I wind up getting is Denver is basically a league average team, and I still have the Jets as -1. I know they're 4-2, and I know people don't understand why I still have them as -1. I try to take every team and project them versus what a league average team would do. And a league average team would basically mean take all the teams in the league, kind of average them all together, and then see if the team that you're looking at is below or above those averages. Maybe I'm a little bit lower on the Jets because I don't want to upgrade them too much, being that they're my favorite team, and I don't want to overdo it here. But I still have the Jets as a slightly below league average team. I mean, they beat a Miami team that was down to its 3rd-string quarterback. They had the amazing comeback against Cleveland. There's really no excuse for why Green Bay lost to him this week, but everybody in the world seems to have been on the Jets here. So I don't really think it's as big a shock as some people are making that game out to be. With that being said, again, we have to see what happens tomorrow. I don't think Denver is a very good football team, especially without Javonte Williams, who, in my opinion, was the most explosive player that they had on that team. And with Russell Wilson not living up to anywhere near the expectations that people had for him. So again, I get Denver -3. DraftKings has it at -3.5. FanDuel has it at -3.5 as well, which to me means there is actually a slight bit of value on the Jets at +3.5 on both of those sites right now. Is it enough value that I want to go crazy and do anything nuts there? No, not really. I'm probably going to be staying away from this game. Definitely going to be watching this game, but I'm going to be staying away from it from the betting side there. But I do think that 3.5 is probably a little bit high here. So I guess technically there is a slight value on the Jets, but not enough for me to want to bet on them. Next game up is the Houston Texans taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Texans are 1-3-1 coming off a bye. The Raiders are 1-4 coming off a bye. So there were no adjustments that I made to this game because both teams have extra rest. When one team has extra rest coming off a bye than the other, we usually make an adjustment about 1.5 to 2 points for that. But again, if both teams are coming off a bye, you can't really adjust both teams, so we just kind of roll with it there. On a neutral field, I get the Raiders are about 5 points better. Add in home field advantage, I get -7 here. DraftKings and FanDuel have it at -7 as well. So basically, I'm on market. No value in this game to talk about. Next game up, the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Seahawks are 3-3, coming off a good win over the Arizona Cardinals, 19-9. The Chargers are 3-2, and they also play that Monday Night Football game against the Denver Broncos. So again, there may be an adjustment made to this number, depending if something happens, some major injury or anything like that on that Monday Night Football game. If you want those adjustments, if you want the updates, make sure you guys get over to ftnbets.com. Here's a little trick for you. You could use promo code Benny, save 20% off any subscription over at FTN Bets. It works on FTN Daily if you're somebody who plays on DraftKings or FanDuel. Works over at FTN Fantasy if you're looking to get some fab advice or looking to see some updates on who you should be starting or sitting on your fantasy teams as well. Once again, promo code Benny, BENNY, saves you 20% off on any of those sites. FTN Bets will be where you can get the updates on the teams that I like once we see what happens on that Monday Night Football game. So let's see. Seattle and the Chargers, I get about 5.5 points better. The Chargers are on a neutral field. Factor in home field advantage, I get 7.5. DraftKings has it at -7. FanDuel has it at -7 as well. Again, very slight amount of value here, but not really anything that I want to go crazy on. You are getting a slight amount of value off of a key number, which makes it a little more interesting. But to me, the best thing to do with this game, if they're giving you -7, just tease it down to Chargers -1. That would be the way that I would be looking to play this game. Probably the best way that you could do it here. Another game you could look to tease it with is the next game that we're going to talk about over here as well. Kansas City Chiefs, 4-2 on the year, coming off that loss to Buffalo, 24-20. Listen, there's nothing wrong with that loss. Buffalo's one of the best teams in the league. So is Kansas City. Buffalo scored in the last couple minutes. Kansas City, didn't make a play. And the next thing you know, they wind up losing that game by 4. I thought they played really well. A 4-point loss to Buffalo is nothing that's going to make me downgrade them in my power rankings. I had Buffalo number 1 in my power rankings before that game. I had Kansas City number 2. I don't think anything about that's going to change, not even the actual numbers for me. The other side of that game is the San Francisco 49ers. They are 3-3 on the year. They're coming off a bad loss to Atlanta, 28-14. Now, I know Atlanta's the team everybody loves. They're 6-0 against the spread, and that's all great, but a good San Francisco team would have beaten that Atlanta team. I didn't think that San Francisco played very well in that game at all, but maybe I'm just a little bit too high on San Francisco. When I factor all the numbers together here, I get Kansas City is probably about 3.5 points better, so more than a field goal better on a neutral field. When you take out the home field advantage, though, I get Kansas City should be favored in this game by -1.5. DraftKings has -2.5. FanDuel has -2.5. Again, when you're talking these numbers below the field goal, below the 3, there isn't really a lot to talk about here. It's not really like I'm going to be super heavy on one side or another, so I don't really have any bets in this game. Next game up, Pittsburgh Steelers, Miami Dolphins. Pittsburgh is 2-4, coming off a win, very good win against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 20-18. I don't think this is a very good team, though. We have to see what's up with the quarterback situation. Like I said, Mitch Trubisky finished that game out. It was started by the rookie, though, Kenny Pickett, and they're two very, very different quarterbacks. So it could change things around, especially when you're talking about a spread, because with Pickett in there, they're probably going to be a little more run heavy, which is not something that worked out very well for them the first couple games. I'm sorry, with Trubisky in there, they'll be more run heavy. With Pickett in there, they're going to go to the air a little more, which could be something that unlocks some of the guys on his team, like a Chase Claypool, George Pickens, who's looked very good with Pickett under center, and even a guy like Deontay Johnson, who is better off with the throwing quarterback. Miami, let's see. So here's the thing with Miami. Here's the interesting thing with Miami. It looks like Tua is going to be back. They kept him out this week, but they already basically said that he is going to be back in week 7. Teddy Bridgewater wound up playing the end of that last game there because the rookie Skylar Thompson wound up getting hurt pretty early on in that game. I think he did something with his hand. I forget, maybe his thumb. I forget the exact injury that he had there. But it does look like Tua is going to be back. So I'm making the adjustment as if Tua is going to be fine and he's going to be playing in this game. On a neutral field, I get Miami about 4.5 points better with Tua on the center. Factor in home field advantage. I get Miami minus 6.5. FanDuel agrees with me. They have it at 6.5 at the open. DraftKings has it at minus 6. Again, half a point here, half a point there. Not really enough value for us to make a bet on, especially when it's below that key number of 7. So that brings us to the Monday Night Football game, which is going to be the Chicago Bears taking on the New England Patriots, the last game of the week that we have here. Chicago did play last Thursday night, so I gave them a little bit of a bump up because they have a little bit of extra rest here. Even with that bump up, though, I get New England is about 6 points better on a neutral field. Factor in home field, I get New England is 8 points better. DraftKings has it at minus 7. FanDuel has it at minus 7.5. I think my favorite thing to do here is just tease this down to minus 1.5. Again, we don't know who the quarterback for New England's going to be, but I don't know how much of an adjustment I'm really going to make. I thought Bailey Zappi looked pretty good out there. I thought he looked better than Brian Hoyer did. He's probably still worse than Mac Jones, but until we find out whether or not Mac Jones is going to be playing, not really much that we could do here in that game. Like I said, would I bet it straight up? I have about half a point of value here. My minus 8 versus 7.5 the books have. No, I wouldn't play it straight up, but I do like the fact that you could tease it down to minus 1.5, get through the 7, get through the 3. New England is at home. It's a Wong teaser leg on Monday Night Football. Although the Wong teaser legs have not been working out very well, that is still the way that I would want to go with it overall. And there you go. That's going to wrap it up for our look at the Week 7 sports betting picks with the opening lines from DraftKings and FanDuel. Remember, get over to FTN Bets, use promo code Benny, save 20% off on any package. For my producer, Deqwan Young, this is Benny Ricciardi, signing off for another episode of Betting with Benny.